Microsoft Excel remains a very misunderstood program. Part of this is due to the fact that it is an electronic spreadsheet, and very few of us can remember what a spreadsheet really is for in the first place. So, I thought it would help quickly before we delve into Microsoft Excel if we just go back and look at what spreadsheets were actually intended to do and what they weren't intended to do. Spreadsheets were the domain of accountants and bookkeepers centuries ago, and spreadsheets were literally giant sheets of paper with columns and rows and figures, and they would spread them out over an entire table or a floor and keep financials for large companies. In the 60s, most big companies that could afford to do it began moving their books to mainframe computers. In the 70s, a company called Apple introduced a small personal computer, and by the late 70s, a program had come along called VisiCalc that was simply a commercial spreadsheet program. It looked like this. This program drove the sales of personal computers for small businesses. As you can imagine, they bought thousands of these personal computers because suddenly they were able to afford to take advantage of the same technology that large companies have been using for years. So a giant market is suddenly created in this spreadsheet application domain, and into it run Lotus and several small companies and a relatively new company called Microsoft, who create Excel for the original Macintosh around 84 or 85. But you've got to remember, at this point, Microsoft is still a very small player in this personal computer game, and Lotus is by far the dominant spreadsheet on the planet. However, in 1987, Microsoft releases Windows, and in 1995, they release Windows 95, and they change the landscape of personal computing profoundly. At the same time, IBM buys Lotus 123. However, they don't do a good job of continuing to develop the program, and within just a few years, IBM just quietly kills off the product because they've made such a mess of it. In the meantime, Microsoft has absolutely built an empire on Windows and Office. So now let's launch Excel, and let's take a look around. To launch Microsoft Excel, we'll first go to the blue Start button. We'll go to All Programs, and we'll look for the friendly green X. Now, in the newer versions of Excel, one of the features people either love or hate is this context-sensitive ribbon. It's extremely important that we know what it is we're trying to do in Excel and that we select the appropriate menu, because if we don't, odds are the shortcuts we're looking for are not going to appear until we do. So, starting from the left, File menu, as with most personal computers, has to do with opening, closing, saving documents. The Home button has our most common shortcuts. We can change fonts, colors, format the document, change the cell types. We can insert, delete cells, and we can do some very, very basic formulas and filtering. Inserting is where we create pivot tables, charts, etc. Page layout allows us to change just what it says, the layout of the page. Formulas has a comprehensive breakdown of functions and formulas available in Excel. Data has things to do with data. Makes sense. Review allows us to do things that we would typically do before sharing a workbook with others. View allows us to change the way we look at Excel, etc., etc. Alright, now that we've had a tour around the ribbon, let's come down to the business end of Excel, the workbook. This is where we find columns and the rows that define a spreadsheet. This document is going to be called Excel 101. I will share it with you in the Google Classroom. Notice that I have put in headers in this first row, and they should be a tip-off that the first project we are going to do is the ever-popular Excel checkbook management document. So, first thing to know about Excel is that if we click on a cell heading at the very top, it will select the entire column, or in the case of the rows, it will select the entire row. So that if I click on one, it will highlight that entire row, and I may then copy and paste it. Alright. Now, if I would like these to be a different width, I can simply click on the divider and slide them out to be as wide or as narrow as I like. I'm expecting that Memo will hold some text, so I'll need a little more space. Now, I need to let Excel know what to expect in these cells, so I'm going to right-click on this column, for example, and go to Format Cells, and I'm going to let Excel know exactly what to expect in these fields under the date column. So Excel expects to see general format cells. It will do its best to interpret whatever I type in there, but if I know in advance all the values that are going to be in a given range of cells, it would be best to go ahead and tell Excel what to expect in there. So I know that I'm going to have dates in there, and I think I would like my dates to fall in this format. So by selecting this formatting for all of the selected cells, which is this entire column, I just click OK, and now all of these columns should be formatted the same. So if I know that this particular event happened on November 9th, Excel should be able to figure out by looking at the internal calendar that November 9th was a Friday and fill in that information for me. So however I put in the information, Excel is going to enforce this format on each individual cell. Alright, so let's test Excel and see just how flexible it is. I'm going to use the accepted shorthand for a date and see if Excel can correctly interpret my shorthand. So I'm going to put in 11/1/2012 and see what we get. And indeed, Excel looks up, realizes that November 1st was a Thursday, and it correctly interprets the date and puts it in the correct format for me. Pretty handy. Let the computer do the heavy lifting and do those kinds of lookups. You don't need to be bothered with that. You can move more quickly that way. Now let's look at, before we finish for today, let's look at one more little piece of Excel magic. In this debit field, I'm going to expect to have, obviously, some form of currency. So again, I could simply put in here minus 41, and I certainly know that I intended that to be $41, and Excel is going to indeed be able to do the math just fine either way. But since I know in advance what this is going to contain in this entire column, let's do that formatting thing one more time. So I'm going to select all of column D. I'm going to right click and go to Format Cells, and I know that this is a special kind of number called a currency. So I'm going to select that. Now, if there are negative numbers, then I would like those to appear in red, just so, to draw my attention. So I'm going to select this. So the numbers Excel is going to see, it's going to know those are dollars, and it's going to put negative balances in red. So let's just test this really quickly. let's say I put in a positive balance in here, it's in black, and a negative is red. Easy, handy, doesn't require me to do any extra work. I don't have to reformat the color of the cells. Excel again will do that work for me. Let's do one piece of other Excel magic before we call it a day. In these cells, I realize here this debit is actually a credit, so I would like to move that over here to the credit column. And while this wouldn't really be a practical way to do this, I just want to show you one little quick piece of magic. If I put an equal sign, that lets Excel know that I'm looking to put a formula in here. Now I could go through my formulas and find the formula that I want to look up the value in cell D3, but rather than do that, I can simply put the equal sign in and then click on the reference cell, and Excel automatically knows that what I want it to do is look up the value that's in cell D3 and place it into that cell. I hit the enter key, and now that value is automatically transferred over to cell E3. And if I change this value, it will automatically change as well. Pretty nice. And that's it. We'll talk more next time.